What's up, fight fans from all over the world? We are back in the war room today, and I am your fight goddess, Chris Baldwin, and I'm here with my fight family, Melissa Smith. She is a women's boxing historian, and my boy, Eddie Goldman. We call him the Conscious of Combat Sports, and we dropped in the war room today because Katie Taylor is going home to Dublin, Ireland, and she is going to be fighting Chantelle Cameron on Saturday, May 20th. That fight is happening on DAZN. These are two undisputed fighters. They both have, I think they have, like, they're 0-0. Nobody's got a loss. So somebody's going to go away with a big L this weekend. And I'm expecting fireworks. Melissa, I'm going to pass it off to you because you are the expert here in women's boxing. So it's a women's boxing weekend. Thank you guys for tuning in. Melissa, let's go, baby.
All right. Well, this is called the homecoming card. It is Katie Taylor fighting not at lightweight where she is undisputed, but taking on Chantelle Cameron at world super light. We're talking super light, going after Chantelle Cameron's undisputed.
And that's at 140 pounds, right?
That's at 140 pounds. Now, Katie Taylor has fought once, as a pro and won, but this is a big freaking deal.
That's right.
Now, it really is. Now, the whole idea of Katie Taylor coming home, for those who don't know this, Katie Taylor is Irish. When she started to fight in the amateur, she fought as a boy, Kay Taylor. She used to have to put her hair up and tight inside a helmet so nobody knew that she was actually boxing. Boxing wasn't legalized in Ireland until 2001. And at that point, she was 15 years old and could start to box as an amateur, had the first female amateur bout in a couple of months later after it was legalized. Rest is history in terms of her as an amateur fighting, winning multiple titles, winning gold at the first 2012 Olympics. But when she turned pro in 2017, this was after the horror show of the murder at the Regency Hotel in Dublin, Ireland, where there was a weigh-in and all hell broke loose. And you had the beginnings of the Hutch Kinahan gang war. And there has not been a professional boxing match in Dublin since then.
Wow. So wait a minute. The authorities, the Dublin authorities or the Irish authorities shut down boxing because someone got shot.
Basically, you cannot, there is no security. They cannot have the security they need to have professional boxing in Dublin. Wow. So there have not been professional fights.
That is
and
crazy.
Katie Taylor in particular has never fought at home. All of her fights, all of her wins have been in the United Kingdom, have been in the United States.
Right.
And here, so this is her first time fighting at her home, where she is the greatest. She is considered the greatest sports figure, male or female, in the history of Ireland.
Wow.
And she is essentially a national treasure at 22-0 as a boxer, as an Olympian, all the first gold medalist female in the Olympics. So it carries with her extraordinary pride in Ireland for her. She really is considered a national treasure, but she has never fought at home. So after the fight with Amanda Serrano, the idea was they would do the second fight in September in Ireland and in Dublin at Croke Park. And Croke Park is as famous a venue for boxing as Madison Square Garden is in New York. And more to the point,
it's an outdoor arena with like 80,000 seats.
Yeah, so it's like it's on par of like those huge fights in London where you have 90,000 fans, right? And the thing about Croke Park is that 50 years before, Muhammad Ali had fought an Irish heavyweight named Alvin Lewis at Croke Park in Dublin in July of 1972. and it was a 12 round. It was not a title fight. It was a 12 round, whether it was an eliminator or not, it was a 12 round bout. Muhammad Ali came to Dublin, fought in Croke Park, and won by TKO in the 11th round of a 12th round fight. So the idea, what Eddie Hearn had in mind was, wow, bring her to Ireland. We'll have her homecoming. She'll fight Amanda Serrano too. We'll have all this history because it'll be, 50 years after the Muhammad Ali fight. But at that point, Serrano's team was like, no, we're not fighting you in September. So that was the end of that. They even had a couple of dates, apparently. So then, fast forward, Serrano had a fight, Taylor had a fight, and then they thought, okay, so now we got to get them back together. Where are we going to go? And by that point, Croke Park really wasn't part of the equation anymore. It was getting to be too difficult. Some of its security, some of its money, all sorts of weird machinations going on behind the scenes. And they landed on the 3 Arena in Dublin and came up with a date of May 20th for Serrano, Taylor Serrano 2. And then shortly after it was announced, Serrano said, nope, have an injury, can't box.
She don't want to fight Taylor again.
Well, that's, it's an interesting concept.
Right.
So then what happened? So on social media, Chantelle Cameron, who is as I said, she's undisputed now at 140, starts screaming, what about me? Pick me, pick me. I want to fight. I'll fight you. I'll fight you. Let's fight. I've been wanting to do this fight. Let us fight. And Katie Taylor says, you know what? Yeah, bring it on. Let's do this. So out of the social media conversation, if you will, the fight was born, and the parties got together and they made the card. And they had Chantelle Cameron coming. She will be the opponent, but they decided to do it at World Super Light rather than at lightweight. So Katie Taylor will, retains her lightweight undisputed, but so that's not on the line, but Cameron's World Super Light is on the line. So that will be something. And then started to build the rest of the card, which very quickly added Terry Harper to the card. And she had already been, as you know, has gone up to super welterweight at 154 pounds and had defeated Hannah Rankin and gotten a belt in that fight, and had been pursuing Natasha Jonas, who has the other 3 at that weight. Terry Harper has the WBA and Natasha Jonas has the other 3, and Harper's team had been pursuing Jonas to do an undisputed match, but that did not work out. So after a lot of negotiating and sort of looking for opponents, they came up with this extraordinary fight, which is Terry Harper will face Cecilia Brækhus at 154, who is coming up from welterweight.
What?
So,
oh boy!
Yep. So Cecilia Brækhus is coming up from welter and will contest Terry Harper at super welterweight. Brækhus has been having camp in UK with the likes of Hannah Rankin as sparring partners. So she's getting the real skinny on what to expect from Harper in the ring. Has been having, a really great camp. And
smoked.
Yeah, and then the third fight is this young woman, Maisie Rose Courtney, who is 2-0. She had her debut fight on a card in Wembley in October October 29th, which is on the undercard of the card where Katie Taylor fought last on defending her lightweight undisputed titles against Karen Elizabeth Caraballo. And Maisie Rose is, was pretty impressive as a fighter. She's had one other fight successfully. So she's now 2-0. And she'll be fighting an Irish fighter, Kate Radomska, who's 3-1. So that should be a pretty good fight as well. And then the rest of the bouts are male bouts. So you've got 3 female bouts, 1 male bout. There had been some other issues. Ellie Scottney was supposed to fight Johnson on that fight card, but there were issues between Cameron's camp and Scottney's camp, and Scottney and Eddie Hearn were asked to kindly have her fight be delayed and put on another card, which subsequently has been, but that left a rather bad taste. And that had to do with apparently with the management teams. Scottney's current management team was Cameron's prior one, and there was some bad blood there. So there was a lot of drama
for your mama
in terms of this fight card. Up until this week, which is the week before the fight, and doing the media opportunities and there's going to be open, I guess the open sparring tomorrow, I think. It's been very low key and very quiet in terms of the fight camps for these fighters. It's been very, very quiet. As I said, there was this drama right at the beginning. But Chantelle Cameron's been very quiet in her camp. Katie Taylor always has a quiet camp. She trains and lives in Connecticut, in a very quiet, rural part of the state, and likes to keep it that way. And they just bring in people to spar against her to help her work on different aspects of her game in terms of getting ready for it. Terry Harper's been kind of quiet. Not a lot of mouthing out there. She's been in her camp. And as I said, Cecilia Brækhus has been in her camp in UK, in London, working out and having folks like Hannah Rankin spar with her. So that's kind of where we are. The background, though, is, I went a little bit into the terrible murder at the Regency Hotel in 2016. But things since then have, we as listeners of our show know, we report on the horrible corruption in boxing at the instigation of Daniel Kinahan, who was still out there, still at large, and based on managing fighters, reporting, still managing fighters, and still has his hand in the fight game. And so there are some very real concerns that there will be trouble this week, up to and including fight time. And there's an article just out today that talked about the security concerns, the fact that Eddie Hearn and Matchroom have hired this huge security force to augment the Guardia, who have promised to provide a lot of police presence, as well as private security in the arena and private security that they hired in Ireland, and then people that they're bringing in, because there's real concern for the security of the fighters, specifically of Katie Taylor and Chantelle Cameron, and security at all of the locations where the media events will be taking place, including, closed in terms of usually workouts are public and anybody can come to a workout. But these media workouts will require ticketing and a lot of serious security coming in and out. Same thing for the media availabilities. I think in the article, one of the articles was talking about the fact that there's security guards assigned to each of these fighters to keep them safe. And they will be surrounding the ring. So we're going to see some very heavy duty security happening. It should be noted that, again, Chantelle Cameron had been an MTK fighter for a brief period of time. So there's some undercurrent of issues with that, even though she herself has never been accused of corruption or anything of that nature. But the fact that she was with MTK at all is a lightning rod in Ireland
Right.
among certain quarters. So we celebrate that it's Katie Taylor coming home and having this opportunity to finally fight in front of her adoring fans. I'll add parenthetically, she's also having a media event with Deirdre Gogarty, the great Irish fighter who was, most famous for fighting Christy Martin in 1996 on the card that essentially created our understanding of women's boxing. She was the other half of that card, and Katie Taylor has wrote to her as a young teenager to say, what do you think? What should I do? Asked her for her advice. So they've had a relationship really all of Katie Taylor's boxing life, and they will be an event on the 19th where they will meet and where Katie Taylor will help honor Deirdre Gogarty in terms of her place in women's boxing in Ireland and in world women's boxing. But there will be some poignancy to that part of the event. So, it's bittersweet in the sense that, yeah, she's home, she gets to box, but there's still a lot of swirling anger and resentment and issues that are very deep and complex in the boxing world in Ireland. I think it's Gary Hutch, who had been accused of the murder in the Regency murder case, was just acquitted. So you got that subtext. So lots going on.
He must have had a Trump judge as his judge.
They did convict some of his associates, some of the lieutenants, but
right.
I want to add a couple of things to this because there's just so many different storylines in this fight. I mean, first of all, the fight itself. Katie Taylor is coming back, as Melissa said. The rematch with Amanda Serrano fell through, and she's fighting somebody who's bigger than her, taller than her, has usually fought at a higher weight than her, and is undefeated and undisputed in that weight class, winning all these belts, and probably her most significant fight several months ago, defeating Jessica McCaskill to win all those titles. So she's coming back to Ireland to fight her first professional fight there. She's not exactly getting a cream puff to fight. This is a very, very difficult fight. Even the betting odds are very close. And if it comes down to a hometown advantage with the judges, that could play a role because we know it's boxing. But this is just incredible that for this kind of fight, Katie Taylor would take somebody like Chantelle Cameron or even Amanda Serrano, with whom she had that very wonderful and close fight last year at the Garden. So that's one aspect of this. And Katie Taylor's getting older. She's about 36. People have noted she seems to have lost a little bit, and Cameron seems to be rising at this point. So this makes it, just from the boxing standpoint, a very, very dangerous fight. But it's also, as Melissa said, very, very dangerous because of the Kinahan connection. Chantelle Cameron's trainer is Jamie Moore, who'd been a longtime associate of Kinahan. Jamie Moore had been shot twice, supposedly by mistake, in Spain as part of this Kinahan-Hutch gang war that was going on, and he's still there. And while Cameron might have been an MTK fighter for a short period of time, Jamie Moore goes back a long way with the Kinahans. So there's that aspect making it very dangerous. And in the Regency Hotel shooting was a card that Daniel Kinahan was involved in, and the Hutch people, some of them dressed up as Gardy, some of them, they even had one of the men dressed up as a woman to make it look like it was a couple, a man and a woman, innocently walking through the hotel, and they all pull out these weapons and start shooting at people, presumably aiming for Kinahan, who was able to escape. you have this situation has really been unresolved at this point. And while the authorities have taken steps to break up these gangs, and there's that big bounty, that $5 million bounty on the head of Daniel Kinahan, and also $5 million each on his father and his brother, they haven't been caught. Somebody's protecting them. These people are somewhere. And also, as Melissa said, Hutch himself now is free, but the feud has not been stopped. So I think that the fact that I know there were different factors involved in whether they could fight at Croke Park, but instead of fighting there, they're fighting at a 10,000 seat indoor arena, the 3 Arena. And I think security concerns were one of those. The fewer people you have, the more security you have, the easier it will be able to control access than if you did like at a big outdoor stadium. So there's all this stuff going on. And as also Melissa said, there have been various reports from the reporters who've been covering this very closely. Our old friend Nicola Tallant, Kieran Cunningham, Donald McRae, who now writes for the UK Guardian, and others have said they have all heard credible reports that Kinahan is still today involved in boxing. He's not going on Instagram and standing there with photos with Tyson Fury and laughing, and photos with Mauricio Suleiman and all these different fighters and all this stuff that he did, because he really violated one of the rules that organized crime has: don't seek and don't get publicity. He violated that, and he really took a hit for that. But he's still involved, according to these reports, which again shows you what kind of governance we have in the sport of boxing. So there's just so many different levels to this story, to this fight. And I think that's related to the low-key buildup to it. They want to attract attention, but they don't want to attract too much attention. And I think they'd be happier if people just sit at home and watch this thing on DAZN rather than really get involved with this. But we're going to see what happens. We're going to see what happens with this, all these different storylines that take place. It's such a major, such an important fight, and it has such international implications. I think it should really be focused on tremendously. It's focused on a lot. I see in the Irish media and the Irish general media and the boxing media, some in the UK boxing media, not too much in the American boxing media, which a lot of whom are, these people are in the pocket of Top Rank. And I don't want to denigrate the Haney Lomachenko fight that's taking place, because you have two. That is a very, very important fight. But I think the Taylor Cameron fight is one of those that really demands the most attention of people. And the fact that Top Rank would, I don't know who had the date of May 20th first, but that they decided to put their Haney Lomachenko pay-per-view on at the same time just shows that, again, Bob Arum's thing just to wreck boxing. So
right, he's like taking a stab at women's boxing. You know what I mean? It's
well,
like,
it was such crap because meanwhile he had Michaela Mayer on that huge card on the O2, and it has the deal with Sky Sports to broadcast it on ESPN. So yeah, Katie Taylor had the May 20th fight before Haney Lomachenko. So that's number one. I mean, yeah, it'll be in different time zones because this will be in 5 hours ahead. The undercard for the Taylor Cameron card starts at like 11:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So it'll finish by around 6 o'clock in New York. That would be 3 7 for you, Chris, in LA. So in Lomachenko card, Haney Lomachenko will get started probably around 7 o'clock. But Arum could care less. I mean, look what he said about the first Taylor Serrano, which was the same night as Shakur Stevenson.
right.
Again, oh, that's terrible. They can't have that fight. You know, who'd watch it? Da 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 da. And then you know we know what happened in Madison Square
Right. They
Garden.
blew
But
the
to
viewing
Eddie's
numbers. Hmm.
But to Eddie's point, in terms of this fight and the value of this fight, the importance of the fight between Taylor and Cameron, and the fact that nobody is picking it up is an outrage. Because Katie Taylor, she's putting every single ounce of her boxing soul into this fight. She's fighting at home. She's fighting a bigger girl. She's fighting somebody who is bigger, stronger. And it's going to be a matter of is Taylor's sense of her own ring generalship, her own speed and quickness,
Right.
her own mental acuity as a boxer, is
Being
that
tested.
where she will?
Right.
Is that's the test, and is that where she will shine? And beyond that, she just loves to fight. This is a woman who loves to fight. She loves to be in the ring. This is her life. She lives boxing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So she is prepared for this. She will be as prepared for this as any fighter who has ever walked into the ring at this caliber. And it is a disgrace and a shame that the boxing world is not singing the praises of this opportunity. Dan Raphael, whose newsletter I get every day into my box, has never said a word about it. There's no headline that talks about Chantelle Cameron, and Katie Taylor.
Right.
It's just disgraceful.
Where is that?
Because
Where is it, Danny boy?
Extraordinary.
Right.
This is an extraordinary caliber of fight, and the undercard is great. I mean, you know, Terry Harper, Cecilia Brækhus will be a really. There's so much pathos to that fight as a story, as a boxing story. Here you have arguably one of the three best women fighters in history in Cecilia Brækhus. She was the first woman in the four belt era to have undisputed titles way back in 2014, 2016, wow. Whatever that was, and held it until she was on the first woman on HBO. She's an extraordinary fighter. She has had losses. She's lost her undisputed to younger women. She's been trying to reinvent herself as a fighter, and now she's given herself that one last chance at a different weight class. And you got Terry Harper, who has won. She's lost. She broke her hand. She re-broke it. She's gone. You know, she had the weirdest knockout in the history of women's boxing. Right. Alicia Baumgartner hit her so hard she couldn't move. Right. She was so shocked.
Knocked out on her feet.
She couldn't even move. And she's come back every time, and now she's saying, hey, I'm going to put it all on the line to fight someone who I know is a better boxer than me, because it's Cecilia Brækhus, but I have more of something, and therefore I have the gumption to try to take this on, to add this to my resume as a fighter. This is the stuff that boxing is made of. It's not about women or men. It's about boxing. And this card has everything. Crime. Homecoming.
Right.
Great fighters. Blood feuds. I mean, it's got everything that you would want in a boxing card, in a boxing match. And so it just makes me, it grieves my heart to think that people don't get it, and that they don't get what women are trying to achieve in this sport as boxers.
Right.
Well, as women, as fighters.
I mean, aside from every other element of corruption, boxing's history is probably the most misogynist of the major sports. I mean, on the amateur level, I forget the exact year, but the International Olympic Committee said, look, every sport has to build gender equality. They have to have a men's division and a women's division, and every country has to bring both men and women to the to the Olympics. What was the last sport to have a women's division in the Olympics? Was boxing. The next to last was wrestling. Wrestling came in 2004, boxing in 2012, and it was only, what was it, the late 90s that they only started having women's boxing world championships on an amateur level. There was all that resistance, and there were all these stories in these
2001.
sports of women having
Pennsylvania 2001. Yeah.
Right, of women having to go to court to be allowed to,
Yeah.
to box, and dealing, just getting court rulings that said, well, we have, these general laws about it, anti-discrimination of women. So you have to, if they want to box, they should be allowed to box. It took all these battles and all this fighting just to get people to allowed to participate in this sport. And on the professional level, again, with all the hype and all the promoters thinking they make money, and with the growth of women's sports all over in so many different sports gaining so much notoriety, you see the resistance of so many of these different promoters out there. So that who is the promoter in more or less recent times that really jump-started the development of women's pro boxing was Don King, Mr. Amoral himself, who doesn't care about anything except money and greed and all of that, but he saw the potential there. All these other hotshots, including some women promoters that were in there, weren't really pursuing this at all, and still aren't pursuing this today, or only on a small begrudging level. So
well, yeah, I mean, you got Lou DiBella in the United States. He's still plugging away. He's still signing women. He's still trying to push these cards, but it's, as he'll talk about it, he'll say it, it's the landscape is even that much harder now because there's no platforms to put it on, and you have media tied to specific promoters, and therefore you're iced out. Look what Showtime last year, their first card with a female boxer was a turning stone on the International Boxing Hall of Fame weekend, because it wasn't a PBC card. It was DiBella Entertainment. That's why. I mean, that's absolutely despicable. And yet here we are. Look, Claressa Shields is coming back into the ring June 3rd. She's fighting Hannah Gabriels. She had tried to get Natasha Jonas. Jonas didn't want any part of her. Savannah Marshall was a no-go in terms of a redo. And who the heck else is there to fight her, really? But Hannah Gabriels, who is the only woman who ever put her on the deck, is going to have a rematch with Shields on June 3rd. They're going to have a card in the United States, in Detroit. It is going to be, they've made a deal to have it shown on DAZN. Shields is busy. She's just been extraordinary, like getting money to bring 1,000 kids just to watch the fight, paying for that. I mean, just all this stuff. But even her, on this card, they've got 9 fights. There's only one other women's fight on the card because they can't get it. They can't get the support to put women's boxing on her own card. It's ludicrous. I mean, it's worse in the United States now than it was 5 years ago, which is ridiculous.
And it took so long to get her to fight in the United States.
In the United States.
And they're doing it, of course, she's from Flint, Michigan. And this card, the media in Detroit, though, are really building this up. Not so much the boxing media, but the mainstream media in Detroit, the TV and the newspapers.
They're all over it.
This card is being held at Little Caesars Arena, which it's been a while since I've been in Detroit. This building was built in about 2017. It's the major indoor arena in Detroit. It's where the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Red Wings play, and it's right in the city of Detroit. They moved from the Palace of Auburn Hills, which is in a suburb outside of Detroit, into this new arena. So they're in the big building there. So they're getting a lot of publicity there. And it's interesting. A lot of people just still don't know anything about DAZN. The fact that they're on DAZN is really going to limit the viewership. At the press conference, that the kickoff press conference for Claressa Shields and Hannah Gabriels, one of the local reporters asked about this, and they couldn't even pronounce DAZN. They had some weird pronunciation,
right, because they never heard of it. Yeah.
Right. I can't even remember what they said. And Mark Taffet, the former HBO pay-per-view guy, who's now the manager of Claressa Shields, how to explain how to pronounce it and exactly what it is. It's a streaming service and all of this, because so many people were unfamiliar with it. And look, not that many people in the United States are watching DAZN. They price themselves extremely high. There are all kinds of problems. They're loading up their shows with this garbage boxing of these so-called influencers and all this nonsense. They're bringing in fake wrestling. They're bringing all sorts of things. In some of the European countries, DAZN has gotten the major national football leagues there. So a lot more people are watching it there in Europe, but it's sort of in Central Europe, but not so much in the United States. And I don't know how many people in the UK and Ireland are watching it either. And it costs less in those countries than it does in the United States. It's very expensive. They just raised, what is it? The annual.
It's $224 now annually from $99.
Yeah,
so,
and
yeah,
how
I
much
just
is it
paid
per
it.
month? $25 a month?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
most of the stuff nobody's going to want to watch.
But beyond that, but more to the point, the fact that they had to go to DAZN for that fight, here you have a 3-time undisputed fighter. 3 times she's run undisputed across 2 weight classes. She did it in middleweight, she did it in super middleweight, and then she did it in middleweight a 2nd time, undisputed. This is a woman who is she's the only American boxer who has run gold medals twice. Only American boxer in the history of the sport. Men's boxing has been around since 1904 in the Olympics. Women's boxing came in 2012. So, and she can't get a bloody deal with it with Showtime or ESPN. She's got to go to DAZN because nobody else will do it. What the fuck?
We should have her manager
and she
talk
put
about
out
that.
She put out a statement recently that was like, I should be the face of boxing. And you know what? She's fucking right. She should be the face of boxing. It really burns me. So yeah, she's going with DAZN because that's what's there. Just like she had to go to Britain, she had to go to UK and make the deals with Sky Sports to get, and Boxer to get anything, because she wasn't getting it here, and still not getting it here.
And the only way Claressa Shields gets on ESPN is she fights in MMA, which is not her basic
PFL.
sport, and gets taken down and out wrestled by somebody.
Right.
That's something that they continue to get outpaced. And the fact that ESPN doesn't pick her up, or one of the major broadcast networks or the Turner networks or somebody doesn't pick her up is just utterly ridiculous. Insane.
And as you say, and what she's doing on her card is it is about Detroit. It is about boxing in Michigan and that great tradition of boxing and that, Kronk Gym, all of that. It's all tied in, and her place in that, and what Salida Promotions, her promoter is Dimitri Salida, who we know in New York as fought in the Golden Gloves in Brooklyn before he turned pro. They're really making a commitment to Detroit, to Michigan and Michigan boxing by putting the fight there, by locating it there, and doing what they can to help support it, to help support kids. She's, in between her, she's training basically out of Florida, but she'll come up to Michigan. She'll go meet with kids and do a kid thing. I mean, it's all about building empowerment and building a lot more and beyond boxing. But again, a brilliant story. This is a true boxing story. She represents what boxing really is about in terms of what we think of as the family of what boxing is about. And she epitomizes that. And it's zero. It registers zero the American consciousness of the sport. Yeah. And it's pathetic.
I think in her case, it makes sense for her to train elsewhere than Michigan, because then she doesn't get bothered by everybody and she could focus on the training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even though Hannah Gabriels is older and Clarissa has a better record, she's taking this 110% seriously. So when you're training at home, you have all the distractions and people want tickets and want this and want that. She's done the press conferences, she's done the interviews, she's done all that kind of stuff, but she needs to really focus outside on the training.
Yeah.
And she's emerging every time I've seen her develop. She just, I don't know if this is the best word to use, but she just seems to not only get more confident, but more matured as she goes on, because she was so young when she started fighting, and she really sees her importance at this point. And it's again, boxing is just it's just so backwards, it's so self-destructive. And the one thing she, interestingly enough, her fighting in the PFL, PFL sort of emerging as a second largest MMA company to UFC. They just signed Francis Ngannou, who had been a former UFC champion. There were talks that PFL might buy Bellator. They seem to have a lot of money and a lot of support for them, including this ESPN contract. So we're going to see what happens with that, but she might be well placed as she gets a little bit better at MMA. But it's hard really to, as they say, have two masters, to be fighting in boxing and MMA at a very high level at the same time. But she said she wants to be a world champion in both. I don't know whether that's really going to be possible for her, because the techniques are so different, your movement, your way of thinking, all that stuff is different. And she's going to be going up against people as she gets better opposition who have been wrestling and grappling and doing kickboxing and Muay Thai and all these other things since they were young, and she hadn't done any of that stuff until recently. So it's a very, to go back and forth on a high level is very, very difficult. But she's taking that challenge because it gets her more notoriety, and she wants that challenge. And so again, that's another incredible sports story out there that's not being covered.
Exactly right. I mean, although she has a remarkable team, and she has a real vision of who she is in the world, and where she's going to go. And look, she's got a biopic coming out next year that'll do well at the box office. She's she's got a plan. She has a plan. She survived. She survived to the age. Somehow she survived till the age of 5, and then 6, and then finally got into the loving arms of someone who gave her an understanding of what unconditional love was, and the rest is her. Yep. And she was able to take that and move and be the woman she's become, which is kind of an extraordinary story.
Yeah, it's been beautiful to watch her grow and develop as a person and as a fighter too. Absolutely.
Yes, as a fighter, absolutely.
Before I forget, I just want to add that Kieran Cunningham just started a series of podcasts which deal with Katie Taylor and the whole. They put it in historical context and the whole incredibly terrible treatment of women in Ireland over the years, and how Katie Taylor's rise is related to women fighting against these horrible misogynist and practices that were just embedded in the society of Ireland. But there was one part, and I'm not going to mention this individual's name, interview one Fossil, who's a boxing writer who gets way more attention than he deserves, who launched this full-blown attack on women's boxing. And the points that this guy made in this podcast were just utterly ridiculous. It sounded like something you'd expect from the right-wing, the MAGA type people. First of all, he conflates women's boxing with all the alphabet soup sanctioning bodies, that there are 1,000,001 titles in women's boxing. Well, that's true. There are in men's boxing. We know that whole system is corrupt. We know that whole system is absurd. You're not saying anything new when you get to that. But then he talks about the level of women's boxing. And here again, you had these mostly men keeping women out of boxing. You had boxing in the Olympics since 1904, except for 1 year early on, I think in Sweden, I forget what year it was, they couldn't have it because Sweden didn't allow women's boxing at the time. But you've had it all that time. And women's boxing in the Olympics only started in 2012. You only started having the amateur ranks with so many champions build up and with so many young girls can start to fight only in the last couple of decades. And it takes a while to build up that infrastructure and to get people involved in the sport. And again, as we said 1,000,001 times, it has difficulty getting on TV, difficulty getting sponsors, difficulty getting funded, the difficulty getting covered in the media. So if you're going to say, after women's boxing being such a relatively new phenomenon, it's not at the level of men's boxing, is just utterly absurd and completely ahistorical and a misogynist view of history that really negated and ignored everything else that was in the podcast that talked about those patriarchal conditions in Ireland and really in other countries around the world too, but it was specifically talking about Ireland. So of course, Ireland, when boxing is extremely popular, both on a professional and amateur level, it isn't going to yet develop to the point of boxing. And again, you still have 2-minute rounds in most of women's boxing, which changes the trajectory of the round. There are 10-round championship fights instead of 12 rounds. So instead of fighting 36 minutes, they're fighting 20 minutes. And that affects the pace and the trajectory of the fight and how you build things up. You have to factor all that stuff in. So to come out with this sort of full-throated attack on women's boxing is just the same old crap. And for somebody who considers himself liberal or whatever, it's, the old Phil Oakes line.
For somebody who
Love me,
considers
I'm a
himself
liberal.
an expert on boxing, it was sophist at best. It was rude. He did something similar. He did a takedown of DAZN recently, and he just counted the number of rounds people fought. I mean, it was ridiculous. This is not how you're dealing with boxing. I mean, go back to whatever you were doing before you started writing, but it was just rude.
Yeah.
It was nasty. And he started talking about a boxer like Ebony Bridges, like, oh, she can't box. She's a club boxer at best. How could she be fighting for a title? Well, why don't you get in the ring with her? And then you tell me how it feels to be on the stinging end of her jab, I'm sorry.
So you guys don't want to name, you don't want to call his ass out?
Because it's not worth it.
I would. It's not worth it, but
You
beyond
can do it
that,
if you want.
Thomas
how long
Hauser is
have
a prick.
we been waiting for Spencer, Earl Spencer, Terrence Crawford's big fight, right?
Yeah, Thomas.
We're still waiting. That, there'll be old men, they'll be still waiting, right? So, but what do you have in women's boxing? You have the best fighting the best. You have Katie Taylor fighting Chantelle Cameron on Saturday.
Right.
That's what women's
and we're
boxing
still
is
waiting
about.
on Spence Crawford. That's all I know.
Exactly. Still waiting on Spence Crawford. And This is what it's all building to, are these fights. And yes, it takes time. Women's boxing was illegal in Ireland until 2001. Women's boxing was illegal in the United Kingdom until 1998. Women's amateur boxing was illegal in the United States until 1994. Illegal, right? It haul people out, threaten them with prison. Okay, it's illegal in Mexico until 1999. Illegal in Argentina until 2001. And talk to Jane Couch, who fought the case in 1998 to get boxing legalized in England, in the United Kingdom. She kicks herself today and goes, why did I do it? It ruined my friggin' life. The fight wasn't getting the license and taking them to court. The fight was entering the ring afterwards and being abused by fans, by refs, by judges telling her she didn't belong there, that she was horrible, that she was dead meat, threatening to kill her. I mean, she had death threats because she had the temerity to go for a British Board of Boxing Control license in 1998. Now, to their credit, it's 25 years later, and their Boxer of the Year was Natasha Jonas this year.
Wow.
They also had their first British belt this year, last week or 2 weeks ago. Lauren Price, who was the Olympian, 2020 Olympian, won. That was the first time they had a British boxing belt championship. They've had the Lonsdale belts in 1912? I don't know, some very early time in the early 1900s. This was their 25th year of women's boxing being legalized, and this was only the first year they had a professional belt in one weight class.
Right. Well, we're making strides and progress. That's the good thing.
Yeah, and the other woman who won this year in the British Board of Boxing Control was Clarissa Shields for Best Overseas Fighter. Right. So you had a double whammy.
Right. I think they just made up that category for her.
Well, they had to give her something.
They had to give her something.
And they were all convinced, Savannah Marshall, she's going to knock her out.
Right. Well, we didn't hear. I haven't heard a peep out of Savannah Marshall since then.
Oh,
well,
no,
actually, she's fighting
Cruz Dezern, yeah.
Cruz Dezern.
Okay.
Finally, Franchon gets a fight. She's been waiting a year.
Right.
That's another. Don't get me started on
how.
No,
that's the next show, Melissa.
That's the next
show. So just hold up. All right. So
you got to know it's in July. We got a way to go.
We got a ways to go. Well, look, folks. Anything else you want to touch on, Eddie, before we go? Wrap it up. Tell the people where they can find you. If not,
yeah, I just did a Patreon article again called "Stop Thief" about one of the worst stoppages ever in the sport of boxing, of Rolly Mero and Ismael Barroso.
Oh Lord, yeah, that was a horrible
Tony Weeks stopped that fight, and the people are discussing, is that the worst stoppage they've ever seen? Was it worse than the one between Julio Cesar Chavez and Meldrick Taylor? So it's in that realm. Taylor was actually hurt, but whether it should have been stopped is open for debate. This one, Barroso wasn't hurt and was winning the fight, and people are just furious and exasperated with this type of stuff. Boxing, again, self-destructive because of its corrupt governance. So I just did that article on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. You could find me at eddiegoldman.com. And I'm still on Twitter because there's really no viable alternative at this point, unfortunately, with this clown running it into the ground. So you can catch me at NHB News. I hope something comes along better in social media, which we can discuss boxing and combat sports and politics and music and culture and everything else, but nothing else. I've tried all these other social media sites, and there just isn't the audience. Just isn't the discussion. There just isn't the traction that's going on these sites. Right. So we'll see what happens, but that's where I am.
Right on. All right, Melissa, tell the people where they can find you, baby.
Find me at Girl Boxing Now on Twitter, Instagram, Spoutable. Not that anybody ever clicks anything I ever post, unless it's a cat video. And then I get a lot of traction on Sugar Ray.
Of course
and
you
then
do.
let's see. I got my boxing website. Well, just girlboxing.org. My book, A History of Women's Boxing, writing my second boxing book, The Promise of Women's Boxing. It's the working title. It'll be out next year. Chugging away on it. Hope to get it done by, July. Please.
Right.
Please. Gotta get it
You
done.
gotta get it done. Get her done.
Gotta get it done.
That's right. Get it done.
Or all this passion of like, be fair to women will come out. Because it's all about the last 10 years of sport.
Equity. We can
equity.
Fighting for equity. That's right. Damn it.
Equity.
That's right. Equity. I gotta make sure I pronounce my T's in these. Anyway, that's another joke. Sometime we'll talk about that. Right. Anyway, folks, thank you guys for tuning in. Please check us out at WAARsports.com. That's WAAR, WAARS, sports.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Fight Goddess Fitness. And I'm also very rarely on Twitter now because I'm a little busy these days. But I'm on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notification button so the next time you find out when we're dropping a video, because we only really come out here to talk about really important stuff. We're not just dropping bullshit in your ear. Okay, so you guys tune in. This is Sports Justice Radio. Thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you later. Peace, love, and push-ups.